Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Assalamu alaikum, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's such an honor for me to be here today, moderating the panel on renewables in Oman. A brief snapshot about myself. I am the Finance Director of Petroleum Development Oman, and in addition, I'm the chairperson of the board of State Street in Saudi Arabia. And over the past 2 years, I have led the team towards the creation of Energy Development Oman and have served as its interim CEO until March of this year. So just a brief context setting about our renewables panel this morning, which I'm extremely excited about. And some of these items have already been touched upon by His Excellency Qais, but it doesn't hurt to say them again. The numerous heat waves over the last few months in diverse places such as India, Europe, London, Africa, or the United States have clearly given the world a glimpse of what lies ahead for mankind if we're not able to cut GHG emissions rapidly, and if we fail to keep the temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius as targeted by the Paris Agreement. Besides the climate emergency, the last few months have also brought another pillar of energy policy into the spotlight: energy security. Indeed, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and other global supply chain disruptions and bottlenecks are pushing our energy systems to the limit, and among other things, resulting in all-time high energy prices, in particular in Europe. In this context, renewables, with their rapidly declining costs, appear, in addition to energy efficiency and other clean technologies, as the key levers to decarbonize our economies and reduce our dependence on increasingly volatile hydrocarbon markets. Today, Oman is a major hydrocarbon producer, with total oil, gas, and condensate production combined of circa 2 million barrels of oil equivalent per day, and an oil and gas industry that contributes circa 30% of the country's GDP. Under the leadership of His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, Oman has defined an ambitious Vision 2040. It is undertaking structural reforms to drive the economic diversification and energy transition in the Sultanate. Oman has indeed the potential to become a renewables and clean energy powerhouse in the Middle East and beyond, thanks to its unique solar and wind resources that enable renewable plants to have extremely high capacity factors for wind in excess, for solar rather, in excess of 25%. In particular, Oman has a bold target of circa 40% renewables penetration by 2040 and is currently assessing a net zero target. The local ecosystem of companies and suppliers is also developing extremely fast, with the creation of Energy Development Oman, which is, of course, the new energy holding company that is in charge of managing the main oil and gas concession, but also in investing in clean technologies. The setup of Hydrogen Development Oman, a fully owned subsidiary of EDO, which is in charge of leading the green hydrogen sector of the country. And of course, OQ, Alternative Energy, with its ambitious clean energy strategy. A number of renewables, as well as green hydrogen projects have been announced and being developed not only by local, but also international companies, including OQ, BP, Shell, Aqua Power, Air Products, to name a few. In particular, the cumulative capacity of the announced green hydrogen products now amounts to more than 30 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. So the objective of our panel this morning on renewables in Oman is really to review the clean energy opportunities in the Sultanate, as well as understand how Omani companies can join forces with international companies, in particular from the UK, given the strong bilateral relations, to create value for both parties, be it in terms of GHG, reduction of GHG emissions, economic growth, as well as sustainable jobs. I'm so proud to be here today. I'm sure you can see it in the end-to-end smile on my face. I am joined by some of the most prominent leaders in the energy sector, not only in Oman, but also in the UK. And before we delve into the details of our panel discussion, may I take this opportunity perhaps to ask each panelist to introduce themselves briefly. Ladies first, so starting with yourself, Najla.
Thank you. My name is Najla Al Jamali. I'm the Chief Executive of OQ Alternative Energy. OQ obviously is a fully integrated and global energy player based out of Oman. We have very high ambitions to be an energy and transition enabler in Oman and going then globally as well. I've been with OQ for the past 10 years. Previous to that, I have lived in UK for 17 years and worked here as well in the oil and gas sector up in Aberdeen and also down in London.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So first of all, let me just say it's an absolute honor and pleasure to share the floor with such distinguished speakers today. So I currently lead the gas business in PDO. I've been in the industry for over 20 years now, working both inside PDO, inside Oman and outside of Oman as well. Prior to my current role, I worked for Shell in their group strategy division, looking at running their energy transition program. And today, in addition to my day job, I'm also the director responsible for our renewable energy strategy in our new energy strategy in PDO, and hence my being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony Harbridge. I'm from BP. I've been with BP my entire career, worked internationally in Treasury, in our upstream business. I also led our investor relations in the UK and Europe for a number of years. The past few years, I've worked in low carbon energy in BP, leading up to, including, and then since we announced our net zero ambition back in 2020. I have had the privilege of visiting Oman back in 2013, I think it was, just as we were sanctioning the Hassan gas development. I took a group of investors, BP shareholders, out to Oman, and we, BP and my Omani colleagues, impressed them greatly with what was possible, and we returned there a number of times over the years, and again, impressed them each time with the progress that the Hassan field became one of a world-class gas development. So it's a privilege to be here today talking about Oman and new energies and renewable energies.
Thank you, Anthony. Tom?
So I'm Tom Clarke. I work for Oman Shell, normally based in Muscat. I lead the commercial business development and our new energies agenda in Oman, which is a great place to work for Shell because there's a little bit of everything Shell is trying to do. It's trying to do in Oman with some great partners. I'm pleased to be here today. I'm here in the UK for this, and last week to escape the heat of Muscat, which didn't go so well. And like many of us, I think I probably feared we'd see some empty chairs today, and it's great to see the room bursting at the seams. Instead, so thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Dr. Firas.
Firas Al Abduwani, a pleasure to be here with you today, this morning. I head the interim team that is establishing HDO. I come there as a capacity seconded from OQ Alternative Energy, where I was the VP of Clean Energy, working with Najla. And before that, I was an entrepreneur working mainly in the regulatory space, looking both at the telecom and power sectors, where quite a few developments and advocacy was put in place. I also chair Amin Renewable Energy, Oman's first utility-scale solar provider or utility-scale PV company. My relationship with the UK extends similar to almost all of the Omani panels here, our studies, so back from the A-levels all the way to graduation and beyond.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now, you know, I'm so proud to be amidst such intellectual capacity. So to kick us off, Najla, we'll start with yourself, if that's okay. Just give us an understanding of what are the clean energy opportunities in Oman, in your perspective.
Okay. Oman, obviously, as previously alluded to, has an abundance of wind and solar, which have a high complementarity, so that's such that most of the day and most of the months can be covered. And I think that's what we're exploiting at the moment. However, there are many energy vectors that are still to be exploited. I feel that offshore wind has not been looked at. I feel that tidal power, especially down along the east coast, and if you go down further south, is also something that could also be looked at. And with respect to, let's say, our own businesses within OQ, we're looking at decarbonization, which from 4 different pillars. First being energy efficiency. We believe that that can take us a long way in terms of decarbonization. And I feel what we're doing in OQ can also resonate at country level, looking at converting as much as possible to a renewable source for our energy, for our assets, be it within OQ or within the country. Similarly, moving into a low carbon molecules, whether they are hydrocarbon molecules or not, such as green hydrogen. And as you're aware, we've announced a number of projects within OQ. And then lastly, looking at negative emission technologies. And I think that's also another phase that we should also be looking at within Oman.
That's completely fascinating. Thank you very much for that, Najla. Looking at perhaps Tom and Anthony as our international players, but very much present in Oman. Perhaps with yourself first, Tom. Why, in your view, is Oman well positioned to become a clean energy powerhouse? And also, from your perspective, what are the critical success factors?
So we've heard a bit about why it's well positioned, I think. And you've got this renewables potential. It is the combination of solar and wind that's a real opportunity. You've got its geographic location. But I think also really important is the track record Oman has in the energy industry. Oman knows how to mature, finance, and execute large-scale energy projects. It's got relationships with energy-consuming countries. You turn to critical success factors, and as you look at hydrogen in particular, I think not just in Oman, but everywhere, there is this gap between cost and available revenues that needs to be closed. And you've got a need to put policy frameworks in place and regulations to support the investment. But I think really importantly, none of the challenges around hydrogen, around building demand, connecting supply to demand can be done by any single company or any single government. So critical really is collaboration. So taking learnings from one place to another, putting skills and capabilities together.
Thank you. Thanks for that perspective. Anthony, what's your view?
I build upon what Tom was saying there. I think the above ground factors, as we used to call them in oil and gas, of the resources and the land are second to none, are very strong. I think also that the standing that Oman has internationally is should not be overestimated, shouldn't be overlooked. Just Oman's is recognised as a place where you can do good business, where business can be done. And I think the last thing, in addition to what Tom was saying, I would pull out would be Vision 2040. It is so important to have that clear vision, but as importantly that it's not something that is 18 years away and there's nothing between now and then. The clear pathway towards decarbonisation and net zero that gives interim milestones, progress that we can, tangible progress that we can step towards in the nearer terms. I think that, for me, creates a very positive, very positive environment in which we can then harness the natural resources that Oman is gifted with.
Thank you. And that's very hands-on perspective because, of course, obviously BP and Shell are very much already in Oman. So thank you very much for that. Now, Dr. Firas, I know that you're extremely passionate about energy, and recently there have been a lot of announcements in the media. So from your perspective, can you give us some enlightenment, I suppose, as to the latest developments in the clean energy space in Oman, but also those that are specifically positioning the country for success?
Sure. Thank you very much, Haifa. I'd like to start from the top down rather than chronologically with regards to the setting the pace for Oman to be an excellent position to support the globe in the decarbonization as well as diversifying the economy for Oman itself. Vision 2040, as Anthony mentioned, is really the guiding star. It sets the socio-economic footprint for Oman, and it sets the direction that we need to go. Out of that comes the energy master plan that we also heard about, and Her Excellency Asila had the slide where she talked about the different projects and different regulatory and policy schemes that come out. So I'll touch on some of those. The energy master plan is absolutely essential. It touches on 7 different guiding principles, which revolve about monetization of gas. It talks about renewable energy. It talks about new forms of energy, primarily hydrogen. It also talks about carbon capture and, most importantly, energy efficiency. So those 5 points have now been articulated as a policy by the government, which is very important for the private sector, both local and international. You then have the regulations that come in place. So each of these 5 different elements are being further detailed, whether it comes to hydrogen or to energy efficiency, and the regulator is playing a significant role there. Now, we mentioned milestones. So Oman has a very forward-looking electricity market. So OPWP was established where it was a monopoly and a monopsony, where it is the single buyer and single seller of electricity, and this requires an evolution to match the rest of the world. And Oman is taking steps towards that. So we announced having the bilateral agreements, allowing off PPA agreements to happen or private PPAs to happen between 2 parties. There was a public consultation that was launched. The consultations have been received, and the regulator is now in the position of articulating what their final judgment would be and how they would go forward. Wheeling was mentioned. This is absolutely essential to enable it. The spot market itself was launched at the beginning of this year, so some trade has been going through it. It's very clear that the PPAs, the power purchase agreements we have today, will fill the bulk of it, but there is some surplus that's been actually traded across it, and given a short span of 3 to 6 years, you will see some meaningful trade take through it. So there are many pieces that a liberalized market, which interests market participants to enter Oman, is really working upon. And it's exciting. Now, liberalized markets also have their challenges. We saw, for example, for the first time ever in Australia's history this year, they had to suspend it because of the energy security and the prices going up. So there's a lot of learnings that we need to do. We have the benefit of looking at the experiences of the UK and other nations and to take the best learnings and adopt them. This is a quick summary of the high-level policies and regulations. Other announcements that come there, I think hydrogen development Oman is a significant one. Hydrogen development Oman was established. We have parties who are very keen on executing projects and developing them. And what was required is to create a framework to orchestrate the different efforts that are happening there.
So you do work for Hydrogen Development Oman, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Energy Development Oman. Do you mind sharing with us what are the company's plans?
Sure, with pleasure. So Hydrogen Development Oman, which is owned by EDO, has its board consisting of the Ministry of Energy, as well as the Ministry of Finance and Oman Investment Authority. This unique blend ensures that it is a well-balanced entity with having direct lines of control from 3 of the key stakeholders in Oman. HDO inherits this from EDO. And this is, from my perspective, is very important because it plays a semi-regulatory role. So having it governed by a balanced board is absolutely important. Now, HDO, we're tasked by looking at the lands that are available and all of the ecosystem that surrounds it. So when we look at the lands, we heard, for example, from Simon that 0.1% is enough to cover Oman's renewable needs. We heard that 50,000 square kilometers have been identified. In fact, the first pass We had across Oman, we identified more than 100,000 square kilometers that could be used for renewable energy, both across tier 1 and tier 2 categories. The second path that we did was indeed, as Her Excellency mentioned, 50,000 kilometers is what is easily and readily available today. What we want to do is to look and ensure that we address maximum value capture for Oman. So rather than having the separate projects taking place, they happen in phases that are meaningful. They address the export market. They also address the local market needs. They also leverage on common infrastructure, and that is something that we would need to orchestrate. You'll see that many projects try to do their things individually to basically control the risk, and this is one way of going forward. We want to ensure that risks are mitigated, but while maximally capturing value for Oman, and that is common infrastructure. And this is a trend that's happening across the globe, not just Oman, and it's a learning space. We want also to have knowledge transfer. We want to ensure that a lot of the supply chain that can be meaningfully and profitably and sustainably developed in Oman to be captured within Oman itself. There are downstream businesses that we're looking at with OPAS and other entities, OIA included, to see how we can bring them into the nation. So rather than exporting electrons and molecules themselves, what about the green products, green steel, green ammonia? What can be captured, particularly with the supply chain challenges that happen? People are moving from centralized manufacturing spots to a more distributed approach. Oman is ideal to attract some of these. So these are some of the things that we are looking at in HDO, along with our partners, to see how we can best develop it and execute it.
Thank you, Dr. Firas. Very exceptional, ambitious, but achievable plans. So thank you for sharing. Najla, what are OQ's plans?
So as I explained, we're going to a decarbonization plan that is in 4 tiers. So we've already doing our energy efficiency initiatives and plans are already in place. We'd like to hit ISO 50001. And then in terms of renewables, we are looking to convert our assets as much as possible to a combination of renewable source plus grid. That not only that reduces our carbon footprint, but it also captures cost savings for our assets, and hoping that we can also look at targeted options or opportunities, let's say, within Oman to do that for other operators, etc. Obviously, the big space that everybody likes to talk about and is very excited about is green hydrogen, stroke green ammonia. There, we've already announced over 30 gigawatts of renewables going into green hydrogen, green ammonia. Various projects, 2 in the Wusta region and 2 in the Dhofar region. We have GEO, which is the largest project that we have within our portfolio. Our colleagues ICE are here in the audience, who are our partners. We also have DEMI, who are our partners in Hyport Duqm. That's probably one of our first projects that we expect to FID. In the Dhofar region, we have H2 Oman, I've alluded to, and I think both some of the officials, Aqua Power and Air Products, are partners over there, as well as we have a project that is looking at with Marubeni and Linde, as well as Dosco from Dubai, to look at another project also within the Dhofar region. Moving forward, we'll be looking at other options. Hopefully, we'd like to look at the next phase. We're interested in projects that may be looking at, like Firas said, going downstream or facilitating the downstream. Let's not stop at the ammonia or hydrogen. Let's look at, can we bring green steel or green cement into Oman? Can we look at sustainable aviation fuel as our next stop? These are kind of areas that are of interest to us.
Exciting opportunities, and I like the way you talk about the collaborative effort as well.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Najla.
You're welcome.
Moutaz, what are PDO's plans?
No, thanks, Haifa. So PDO this year celebrates its 85th anniversary. And our recently refreshed strategy looked at what it is that we'll be doing over the coming 20 years, and specifically how is it that PDO will be supporting Vision 2040 and its transition to a low-carbon state. So there were 3 themes identified as part of the strategy. The first 2 looked at how do we grow our core business, but while remaining both competitive on a carbon and cost basis. And the third theme, which we refer to as Theme C, really looked at what are the adjacencies to the core business that we can very easily move into, and in the longer term also create some newer opportunities. So the key activities underneath this theme C. The first one is continue to deploy renewable energy for our own use. And good news here is PDO has been an early adopter of renewables, all the way from solar thermal at scale with the Mir'ah project, Amin Solar, PV project that OQ was an investor of. And if I look at the projects in the pipeline today, we're going to hit 30% penetration of renewables by 2025, and we have a target in the strategy to hit 50% by 2030. The second activity is the development of carbon capture, utilization, and storage for our own operations, but also in the longer term, create this asset to support Oman's industrial decarbonization, ensure it also remains competitive in the long term as well. And then the third one is looking at developing blue hydrogen. And we see that really sitting quite nicely and complementing very well Oman's green hydrogen ambition, certainly from a cost competitive perspective, but also in terms of acting as a catalyst to stimulate local demand with blue as well. In fact, we're working very closely with OQ, working very closely with Najla in introducing hydrogen mobility into our operations. For context, we cover some 300 million kilometers every year. So that's the examples of really trying to bring in and scale up that local demand. But I think in summary, look, the strategy that we've developed along with our board looks at how do we best leverage the very large portfolio that we have through collaboration with players like OQ, like Shell, and abroad as well, ensure that we support Oman's energy transition ultimately to a green economy.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Moutaz. I'm going to move to Anthony. Anthony, working for an international player, what are the opportunities for international companies to partner with Omani companies specifically and invest in clean energy in Oman? Very briefly, please, if you may.
Brevity is not my strength, so I'll try. The renewables and new energy is deceptively complex. People who try to sell you solar panels tell you it's very quick and easy, you just install them, plug them in, and they're done. But when you try to build out big renewable energy ecosystems at scale, it's complex. And it needs multi-energy solutions to provide firmness, to support the intermittency of renewables, and it requires integration from solar and onshore wind and the supply chains that they have, all the way through to the customer. So put simply, you can't do it on your own. Now, it's all very good and well to sit here on a panel and talk about integration and optimization. So let me give you two examples, brief examples. Firstly, over the past 10 years, 90%, I think slightly over, 90% of our spend in Oman, BP's spend in Oman, has been with Omani companies. And there was one instance, I think, back in very early in our program where we weren't able to find an Omani company to provide a service. So this international company, we supported them in developing an Omani vendor group who we could coach and bring on, and in time, they became the vendors. So 90% of our spend in Oman over the past 10 years with Omani entities. And that to me should be the minimum as we look forward to the base load that we go for when we look forward to investing in renewables. Let me give you another example of what this requires and how Oman already has been able to support it, and that's innovation. So a lot of what we're talking about today, no one's actually done before. So building out big renewables and green hydrogen positions at scale, at the gigawatt scales that we've been talking about, no one's done that before. So that's going to require integration. It's also going to require innovation. And in Oman, back when we started doing our tight gas project in Hassan, the anticipation was that all the learning would come from around the world and we'd put it into Oman to help Oman learn, and we did. But far quicker than anybody recognized was that the innovation in how we exploited the tight gas in Oman, those learnings went out around the world, and Oman was recognized as being a leader in tight gas. And one of the innovations that we're very proud of was something we're calling green completions. And this, I won't go into the technical details, mainly because I don't understand them, but this is about how you capture gas that would normally be flared when you start up a well. And the program that we've had in Hassan has managed to take emissions out of the system equivalent to around 70,000 cars a year. And that technology, that process, innovated in Oman, has been, again, exported elsewhere in our portfolio and others. So, put simply, we can't do this on our own. We need to work with others to integrate and to innovate. And I think you can only make long-term sustainable investments at the scale we're talking about in new energy in Oman if you are partnering sustainably with partners in that country.
Thank you. So, Dr. Firas, in 30 seconds, literally, no pressure. What are the opportunities to use green electrons, green hydrogen, or biogenic CO2 in industries locally, particularly Omani industries locally?
Transitioning existing industries is going to be quite expensive, and it takes effort and time. So when we look at them, the sector that are, if you look at the hydrogen ladder, as they call it, you have always petrochems, ammonia as the top two, and then have mobility, heavy mobility coming next, all the way down to power coming later. And then steel, of course, as among the tier ones. But moving these requires enormous investment, sometimes completely new lines coming up. So in addition to looking at decarbonize, which we actually look at it over a longer period, we're looking at attracting businesses that start fresh with the lines that are optimized for hydrogen consumption. So both happen in tandem. So yes, we do want to transition the existing ones, and we give them some breathing space to be able to do that economically. But what we're trying to promote is that with these green electrons and with this green hydrogen as derivatives, let's start new businesses that capture them. So aluminum can work on green electrons very easily. If you take recycled steel, that works on electrons quite straightforward. Okay, there are some cost disadvantages, but those with time will be resolved, particularly if you have the ecosystem around it. And then we move to the other elements. So we also look at the market signals. Germany has mentioned, for example, they want a third of their imports to be ammonia and then methanol and sustainable aviation fuels. This gives us a signal of what is required. Maersk, who is one of our partners running the port of Salalah, they also mentioned that ideally they would like Salalah to become one of their bunkering stations for methanol. So there are a lot of signals already available there that we can take and leverage and move forward with.
Thank you for that brief response. We'll move over to Moutaz again, 60 seconds, no pressure.
Yeah,
what is the role for blue hydrogen in Oman?
So the role of blue hydrogen,
yes, please,
in Oman. Okay, so blue requires CCUS, and as I said earlier, in terms of the refresh strategy, that's one of the things we're looking at doing. But essentially, if you can achieve low-cost CCUS in country, and our numbers suggest that we're actually competitive at the global scale in terms of CCUS, then blue, if done well, and what I mean by done well is effectively you've captured 90% or more of the CO2, then blue, if done well, is a no-brainer. I think the end destination for everybody is green. The additional value that blue brings, it allows customers that can't afford the premium and are looking for cleaner options, but can't necessarily afford the premium today of green. It gives them, that second offering in terms of cost. It also allows us to find cheaper ways of scaling up again, the demand that I talked about earlier in countries. It's exceptionally important that for us to get the maximum value add from hydrogen as opportunity as a country, whether it's IP commercialization or whether it's R&D, we've also got to be end users and create that demand locally. In fact, the project that I mentioned earlier, hydrogen mobility with Najla, that we're working with OQ, that's sponsored by the Ministry of Transport, The idea is we scale up we leverage the operations we have, we scale up within the companies, but then ultimately it actually grows at the local level. The benefit is we're never going to be large at the global level, but the benefit is, take hydrogen mobility, for example. If you're able to do that, then you're one of the first pioneers globally in terms of large-scale utilization of hydrogen mobility.
Certainly. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all good things come to an end. We're going to have to wrap up this panel, unfortunately, but what we will do is perhaps ask each panelist to take about 60 seconds or so, just to share your final remarks, key takeaways, or anything that perhaps you wanted to share with the audience that we didn't get round to discussing. Again, ladies first, we'll start with yourself, Najla.
Okay. Obviously, as we've heard today, there's a lot of buzz and there's a lot of interest and there's a lot of, let's say, conviction behind setting up alternative energy within Oman. OQ alone has investments of about 40 billion in total of all our projects. I think that alone creates a nice base. We'd like to see us grow the pipeline in terms of other opportunities. I'm talking about direct air capture, CCUS, as we've talked about. I think that's being underutilized at the moment, looking at infrastructure, common infrastructure opportunities there, looking at sustainable aviation fuel, tidal power, offshore wind, all of these, green steel, green cement, anything downstream. I think that's of interest to all of us. I think there's another opportunity around understanding is when you have these large-scale projects, then that allows an onshoring. So we'd like to see the onshoring of a lot of our supply chain and assembly, and then some of our projects are really based around that and having that large scale that attracts onshoring of opportunities.
Brilliant. Thank you for your contribution, Moutaz.
Yeah, I think, look, key takeaways for me, look, collaboration. So we talked about hydrogen mobility with OQ. We signed an MOU actually with Shell Oman on jointly developing CCS in the country. I think the other thing is generating that demand locally, maximize the value add from this great opportunity, of which Oman is one of the countries at the forefront. And I think the last takeaway for me is really around the whole concept of the energy transition. I think it's important that we don't become too ideological. Going back to your question around blue, at this early stage of the energy transition journey, if you think of the global net zero ambition, massive. If you think of the mega tons of hydrogen required to achieve that net zero ambition, we can't afford to be ideological, can't afford maybe, I'll use the term, puritanical when it comes to new energies. The energy transition ultimately is a race. And our main competitor is time. It isn't, this product or that product. It's about adopting an all of the above mindset. So that'll be my final concluding remarks, if you like. Thank you.
Anthony, final remarks?
BP bills itself as an integrated energy company. We want to be driving progress across the energy system, whether it's decarbonisation of oil and gas, whether it's renewables, whether it's hydrogen, green or blue. We remain tremendously excited about all of those opportunities in Oman. And it's great, as I said at the start, to be in a conversation about Oman and about new energies. And I look forward to many more discussions. I'm equally looking forward to getting on with the program that we have under our strategic framework agreement, which begins very soon, data collecting in onshore wind in Oman. So talking and discussion always. Actually, we're going to get on and do it now.
Brilliant. Thank you. Tom, final remarks.
So really briefly, just there is such clear potential, isn't there? And it's to decarbonise the production base. Oman has got continued producing LNG, which still has a role in the energy transition, and then all of this potential beyond it. And we probably shouldn't lose sight of the challenges that will be involved in making a success of it. But it's a really, really exciting time for Oman.
Thank you. Dr. Firas.
I think this space is extremely exciting, as Tom mentioned. It's also very complex, as Anthony mentioned. And this actually brings the nice blend of pressure and execution to come into play. And I think like everything in life, if you break it into smaller chunks of problems that are systematic in their approach and with open and transparent dialogue and collaboration, these can be addressed. I think there's a lot of value to be captured. Oman has decided they want to be a first mover in this space. On the supply side, we have other elements of the demand side to look at. We also have the financial risk elements that we want to ensure that, as we heard from the UK, for example, support and integrate and benefit from. We have the innovation that we want to capture. And then, as Najla mentioned, there's the onshoring of these technologies. And rather than them being project-specific, they become nation-specific, a portfolio approach that benefits all of the players across the value chain.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been an inspirational panel. Thank you very much. I'm sure the audience same shares of you. Well done.